My most life-changing investment was only $20. That's how much I spent on a group surf lesson in Biarritz back in 2010. I was 18 years old and just finished high school. To celebrate, we toured Europe with a group of friends in a camper that was twice our age. This surf class was career-defining. I still remember the moment when I first felt the energy of the wave moving me forward. That moment hooked me. What followed were surf trips, deciding for universities that allowed me to spend my semester abroad at surf spots. I worked every hour next to my studies to afford more surf trips during semester breaks. I fell so deeply in love with surfing that I decided to dedicate my career to the protection of my favorite playground. The story that I never tell is how horrible I am at surfing. I own 4 surfboards, my family has to spend every vacation at a surf spot, and I spend all my fun budget on surfing. And yet, I can't perform a proper bottom turn. I learned that many landlocked surfers hit that glass ceiling. That's why I sat down with Joe Koener, who fixed that problem for me. Joe is a surf coach based in Portugal, but he works with surfers around the world. This episode is part breakdown how to become a better surfer, no matter what your level is, but also what it means to believe in a dream and turn that dream into your life, even if it means a lot of risk. This is Where the Ocean Meets Joe Koener.
Where the Ocean Meets.
Joe, you've been coaching surfers for years now, and obviously you are a surfer yourself. Can you tell me about the moment when you decided to go from I'm just surfing to I'm going to coach people how to surf?
Yeah, for sure. That's a good and an interesting question as well. So I think that moment never really happened in itself because I already came into the discipline of surfing as a coach. I was coaching Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before for many years, and I just came in directly as a coach. So when I stood up the first time on the surfboard, I was, of course, mesmerized by the experience, like a lot of us. And I came in directly looking at it. Okay, how can you progress on this faster? What could I change? What could I maybe change in some of the feedback I've gotten from, the first coaching experience I had with other surf schools or other surf coaches? And I came directly in from that experience. So I didn't really make that switch. I kind of was directly looking at it from a perspective of a coach. When did I become a surf coach? Early 2017, when me and my now business partner, Garrett Lane, who's a surfing sports physiotherapist and ISA level 2 surf coach from Australia, when we decided to put surfing anatomy into place and bring a little bit more of a deeper practice and method into the surf coaching game.
At what age did you start surfing?
At 30, 29 and a half.
Okay. It's so interesting that surfing somehow is so life-changing for many people, specifically when they start a bit later, when they don't grow up with it. At least that's how I feel about it. Do you have an explanation for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Why is it so life-changing? Especially for people at a later age, of course. Bringing into account that maybe a lot of these people do not live near the ocean when they start surfing later, because otherwise they potentially would have started at a younger age. Why is it so life-changing? There's no direct, easy, quick answer to it, because I think it varies a lot on the person and on their character and where they come from, what their background is. But one of the common threads is 100% the exposure to nature, because what is surfing? Surfing, for those that have not surfed before or are new to the conversation around surfing, surfing is a powerful dance with nature. Yeah? We're riding energy that's traveled across the seabeds, the Atlantic, Pacific Oceans, Indian Oceans, across water, and that then hits the shore. And for a glimpse moment, we need to try and connect to that energy, and we need to try and surf it or dance on it as much as possible. And I think that in itself is something completely unique in the world. There's nothing quite like it. And then, of course, water in itself, the vastness of the ocean can be very intimidating for people. And I think some of the life-changing moments that happen in there is when people go into the ocean and they feel so vulnerable at first. We're not really in control. I think any other discipline in the world, if you start doing it, take skiing, snowboarding, boxing, basketball, yoga, art, music, whatever you do, when there's a moment of I'm fatigued or this is a bit too much, this feels overwhelming, there's a clear stop button. You can just stop immediately. Skiing, you just stop skiing, you sit down on the slope. Worst case, you call for help. Getting the hill, you back down the mountain. Any other discipline, you can throw the towel, you can stop. Surfing, if there's a moment of overwhelm, there's a moment where you feel overwhelmed, there is no direct stop button. You will need to get back to the shore. You're in the ocean. Us as humans, we don't spend that much time in the water on a daily basis. So that in itself, we're not in our element. So we're completely out of our comfort zone. So surfing definitely brings in that unpredictability and being okay with changing circumstances, changing conditions, changing environments, and to a certain extent, a vast amount of chaos as well. Because as soon as you go into conditions that might be a bit more challenging or slightly bigger, more powerful surf, what we experience a lot in the winter here in Portugal, for example, when the North Atlantic wakes up and we have bigger storms generating swells, there's also a lot of chaos in there.
Yeah, I think it would be fascinating to connect your brain to one of those scanners and see which areas in your brain light up when you actually catch that first wave, because it hooks you so much, this initial push. It would be truly fascinating. Going back to your first waves, what was it in your journey of learning how to surf that made you think, I believe there's room for me in teaching this differently, maybe better? What were you missing?
There's kind of two answers in there. Like, one, of course, is personal, and the other one is more for the collective good. The personal one, I mean, as much, as I love working with other people and students, as much as there's also like an egocentric pursuit in surfing, you also want to like continue to surf and expose yourself to that powerful nature. And I think I realized coming from other disciplines, I used to be a professional musician for a long time, trying to master, an instrument. If anyone out there has played an instrument or is doing any other art form, it's an endless pursuit. But to some extent, you need teaching, or at least at the beginning, you need clear foundations and you need to have a little bit of a structure. Otherwise, it's going to be more difficult for you to progress. And then coming from the discipline of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is one of the hardest martial arts to practice on earth and one of the most effective as well, but it's very, very complex. And seeing there, my progression rate, once I started, not just sticking with, let's say, the normal concept of training, but like looking into, okay, how can I fast track? How can I power this? How can I supercharge my learning with this? Seeing that there was a very fast learning curve for me. And then seeing also in other disciplines, not just Jiu-Jitsu, I mean, every other sport discipline on planet Earth has very clear, strong foundations and structures how to learn something. And when I started surfing, I was a little bit surprised by the lack of structure and the lack of structure and guidance in a way. I got thrown a lot of like different cues got thrown at me from touching water, looking where you go, sitting down, compression and extension. But I mean, very, very vast in a way. Like it sounded like a lot of it was just transmitted from one person to the other, maybe learned from childhood on. So people were able to do something, but they were not really able to transmit the knowledge or teach it because they potentially didn't have to figure it out. They just learned by doing it over the course of 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how old they are at the time when they're transmitting the knowledge or when they're working somewhere else, coaching. Yeah.
Interesting. And this episode is meant to really help people understand how they can either, if they're complete beginners or if they're kind of intermediate, already progressed a little bit, how they can become better surfers. So it would be super interesting if you can give a bit of an overview of how your method works.
I know that any strong method in any discipline, the key of it or the foundation of it, it has to be always have a clear and strong conceptual understanding, which can come through refined language and which then helps you transmit knowledge into skill. That skill then has to be somewhat trained. you know um Now, the difficult part in surfing is, when we are in the ocean, maybe for, the intermediate surfers know that, the beginner surfers are maybe aware of it. People that don't surf, they don't realize this. But when we're in the ocean, we spend 2 hours paddling and sitting on a surfboard, and we might stand 10 or 15 seconds on a surfboard on an ever-changing canvas. No wave is ever the same. If you bring it to another board sport, if it's snowboarding or skateboarding, you can go to the skate park, and if you're saying, today I'm going to land my first ollie, which is a normal jump, or kickflip where the board spins, you can do, repetitions until your foot falls off, and maybe you'll land it that day, which you don't have in surfing. So the component of drilling is skill, transmitting knowledge into, skill that is tangible and that you can apply, is a very deep part and component of our methods. We are really heavily leaning on, that's why we created the book as well for our teacher trainings, on refined language. Why is refined language so important? As I said earlier, people would throw terms at me like sit down, look where you want to go, touch the water, and you'll turn the board. But if you look at surfing in itself, on the wave and on the canvas, it was very hard for me, at least at the beginning, and also I think for most surfers out there, to understand, where am I applying some of these cues, if they even work. Where am I applying them? Surfing is quite complex and very vast. It is, as much as it is a sport, it's also an art form, and the variety of different surfers and surfing style is as vast as music. You have people shortboarding very aggressively and doing pivots and really ripping the wave apart, so to say, which could, if you bring it back to music, could be punk rock or very aggressive metal or rock, versus, the longboarder on a 2-foot wave, borderline is the ukulele playing. So, where all these cues, where do they fit, and how do you structure that? So that brings it back to our refined language. We created part of a language, but also we just drew from other disciplines. So we took from other different disciplines that were relevant, and we brought some of that language that already existed in other evidence-based sports in, so we could have a segmentation of the maneuvers. What does that mean? Any maneuver that's complex, could be also in another sport that you can relate to right now, has different steps. And these different steps need to be tangible, and you need to be able to understand, where am I doing what on the wave? And if you're not able to articulate it yourself, it's going to be very difficult to apply that in a moment of flow state in a wave. And I'm talking flow state because flow state is probably what most people are constantly aiming to achieve in the water, because surfing has to be very instinctive, because we do not have much time to reflect whilst we're on the wave. Anyone that has surfed before knows that no matter how much theory somebody throws at you on the beach, the moment you are in the water, it's all out the window. You don't remember anything. You borderline don't even hear the person screaming at you, go left, go right. So what does that bring us to? It brings us to, I think, a problem that we identified in surfing, or like in surf culture or in surf coaching culture. Also because my business partner has a surf camp since more than 15 years in Sri Lanka, and he saw the repeating guests that came back to the surf camp, how little progress there was, even over a longer period of time, by just ocean exposure and by just surfing. Which brings it back again to, is the way to get better at surfing, is the only way to get better at surfing by going into the ocean or moving next to a body of water or to the ocean? I would highly argue no. Because as we said earlier, you spend maybe per surf session 10 to 20 to 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds if you're a really good surfer on the board. The rest you're sitting, paddling, and doing pattern recognition, which brings it back to, you need to do the work outside of this of surfing, outside of the water, which is quite normal. I mean, any other discipline, it's the same. You know, if you take basketball, for example, you would not expect to play the playoffs or the game on the weekend if you don't show up to practice all week. And practice is not just doing a game against your peers. Practice would be different dribbling techniques, different passes. You drill um, certain components, certain plays of the game before even then rehearsing the game, so to say, and then playing on the weekends. So I think it's sort of one of the only sports where people are just grabbing the surfboard and running to the beach and like, okay, well, someone showed me 5 minutes how I should pop up and how I should turn the board. Let's go and do it, which then is absolutely crazy to try and have even progress, because then you're going completely out of your comfort zone into an environment that's ever changing. There's no fixed courts, there's no lines, there's currents ripping you, there's other people, there's a high heart rate, you're dealing with a lot of variables, and then you're trying to apply a very defined skill on an ever-changing canvas. So yeah.
Yeah, and to me that was very liberating because I'm a landlocked surfer, right? And I've been trying for years to get better, and I simply don't. And I always blamed it on, yeah, I only have a week or two per year to go surfing, and that is already quite a luxury problem because I already started. And I want to go back one step to someone who's an absolute beginner who never touched a surfboard. What would be your recommendation how to get started? Do they need to prepare anything to get started, or
An absolute beginner, the biggest prerequisite would be that you are open to failure and that you embrace failure and that you're super happy with every little step that you move forward, because it will be quite difficult at the beginning. That is a mindset. And then the other thing would be physically, the better you are developed in cardiovascular activity, the better it will be. Because if you have a high heart rate, you'll gas out quickly. And then, of course, if you're grasping for air and you already have a hard time recovering as you're paddling, or even just pulling the board out into the lineup can be quite exhausting, or into the whitewash, you will have immense trouble realizing what's going on and even focusing on any of the skills that you're trying to apply. So just bring in a little basic fitness level, and that's the start. Any other recommendations? It goes too specific, because every human comes in with a different set, with a different skill set, with a different background, with different attributes, but also negative attributes, and those need to be assessed if you want to progress, if you want to continue. Just like any other discipline, a coach would look at his teammates and decide, oh well, you're going to play defense and you're going to play attack and you're going to play this, because based on your skill and your body type. And it's the same in surfing. So just putting something generic out there will not really tick the boxes. The first thing is, yes, have a little baseline fitness, because you're doing sport, and then it's really about looking at to look what you're trying to achieve. As I said earlier, are you going to play the ukulele or are you going to play a rock and roll gig? And these come in with completely different physical attributes. Like one, without going into many details, but one is really explosive. The other one gives you a lot of recovery and more isometric holds. So it really splits into so many different components after that.
And the funny thing is, for me, my journey into surfing was I always loved watching these action sport clips when Red Bull came up and all that. And I thought, out of all of those sports, surfing looks like the one where I'm least likely to hurt myself. It looks quite easy, right? So you can take 3-4 strokes, but they only show you the highlight reels. They don't show you the struggle of paddling out for the first time on a longboard that is more of a boat, and even tiny whiteboard like throws you back and you have to get up again and paddle. Like, it's a fantastic workout, but it's not as easy as it looks from the outside. That's for sure. Um, and I know there's this, and by the way, it does hurt if you fall off a wave. Like,
It can.
Jake,
It can hurt. It can hurt for sure.
yeah.
And here again, if you are coming in with a little bit of a structure, you've done a little bit of physical activity, that will, secure your joints. It will give you a bit of impact resilience, even on the surface of the water.
Yeah.
For
Well,
sure.
I can also tell you there's no faster way to gain back your fitness than going surfing. It's an incredible workout. Um,
It is, but I would also push back on that. It really depends. That is again very like specific to the environment you surf in, the board you choose, and the waves or the ocean that you surf in. There's a big difference in coming to France, Portugal, the Atlantic Ocean, and going out surfing there, and also being already an intermediate surfer, going out into the lineup and paddling around in the currents, versus going on a surf trip, I'm saying, to Lombok and sitting out the back with 50 other people for half an hour and, waiting until it's your turn to potentially even be pushed in.
Yeah.
The fitness requirements are completely different. If you're going into the Atlantic Ocean every day, yeah, you'll gain more cardio, you get fitter. If the other one, borderline, won't give you any fitness. But both can be very empowering and very healing. That's again where the beauty and the vastness of surfing comes in. I think earlier, just to touch back on how our method works, I got a little bit sidetracked by a couple of because it's so vast in surfing. I think to bring it down to a point, it's like we take refined conceptual understanding, translate that knowledge into skill. That skill needs to be trained by our students or by the teachers that want to continue to teach others. And then that skill that you acquire through, vastness of tools, from land-based training to breath work to, maybe even surf skate. Sometimes we use other things. We use rapid surf and other, conceptual understanding and drills. And then from there, you take what you've already acquired, the skills that you're trying / that you are beginning to understand. You take that into the ocean or a wave pool, and you create a loop out of this. You see what has crossed, and then it's my choice or my choice. Then it's my role as a coach to identify or to help you identify what we need to change, what has crossed, what cues land, how do we tweak this around. And then, of course, the last pillar that I didn't speak of is the capacities, like your fitness and maybe perhaps certain strengths in the way you're built versus maybe certain shortcomings, and how do we treat this and reinforce some of those so you are able to perform better in the ocean. So you have the conceptual understanding, the skill development, and the capacities.
And this is already quite an individual approach, right? If I'm a beginner and I say, okay, I want to go to my first surf camp, obviously I can recommend the ones from Garrett in France and the one in Sri Lanka. But assume I want to go somewhere else. Is there a way to separate good instruction from bad as a beginner?
Yes, that's a good question. So I think we need to look at what surf coaching is and what it isn't. For example, when we do our teacher trainings, we have our coaches. They need to be able to coach people for at least 1 hour, which is the whiteboard. No video footage, not having been out in the surf, to really be able to transmit knowledge. Yeah. And to really be able to understand the people in front of you and be able to coach them. A lot of surf camps, in itself, the business model is not necessarily surf coaching. It's a small add-on, but what they generally do, they are selling you access to waves. Yeah, they are selling you access to a limited resource, which then means that even if the coaching is not on a good level, or the coaches are maybe not even, trained coaches, it means that even if that is not the strongest volley in their court, you'll still be happy because you got waves. So that's a complete different business model. So you need to be able to identify, is this a good surf camp? And am I paying for coaching or am I paying for waves? And that is a big difference. And that also explains sometimes higher price points at certain surf camps. You're like, oh, but like this surf camp takes me out surfing twice per day, and I'm saying paying 500 euros per week. The other surf camp, wow, it's so expensive. It's like 2,000 euros per week. Well, but both are doing video analysis and both are selling surf coaching. There might be a difference between. That's all I'm saying. And that's something that people should always consider when they go and look for knowledge. Am I paying a surf coach? Am I paying for waves? Am I paying, I'm saying, an Instagram influencer versus am I paying a surf coach? There's really big differences in this.
What would be questions the beginner should ask to figure out what they get?
I would, first of all, look if I find any like feedback on the internet, because the best feedback is always given by people that have reviewed that place. Because the answer somebody can give you, might be coming from one particular person, maybe even the surf camp owner. But if that isn't filtered through the whole structure of their surf coaches, then maybe even there's lags. I would potentially ask the people, what are you giving outside of the waves? Like, how is the video lesson structured? What are we looking at during the video lessons? What is the background of your coaches?
Do the boards matter at all that you learn on? Is it important if it's a soft top or a hard top?
I mean, soft tops are very important at the beginning. I would argue that soft tops, as soon as you go into green waves, are hindering your surf progression. It's definitely harder to put a surfboard on a rail when it's a soft top. The boards, I wouldn't put the biggest emphasis on the boards. I would put the biggest emphasis on the structure of the daily routines in the surf camps. To bring it back to the questions, what are the daily routines? What can I expect from this? And I mean, we have to be realistic here as well. Like, what are people? I think a lot of surf camps are doing a good job for what they're supposed to do. Like, you cannot teach somebody, like, you cannot really improve someone's surfing in 2 weeks when they come to your surf camp. You can give them an introduction, you can give them a couple of tips, but the real work to be able to instinctively pull off a maneuver on a wave has to be done in the months before. The preparation towards, as I said earlier, the game that you're coming to play. If it's the Sunday game with your team, you're going to prep for months for this. So you can't really expect to go to one more surf camp and suddenly unlock your cutback for the rest of your life. Yes, that might happen in 1,000 individuals because they've been through a very long learning progress and suddenly it clicks, or something that they've unlocked in that surf trip will help them. But I think people have to be just really aware, what am I paying for? Am I going on a vacation and I want to get waves? Yes, amazing. Is there a little bit of surf coaching on top? For sure. And then in that term, there are not many red flags because, tips can be viable. Tips can help. Biggest red flag, I would say, if you really want to be sure that you're getting a little bit of like good surf coaching, would be ideally, and this is actually a good one, you have two coaches, which costs the surf camp more money, but you have one person on the beach and one on the water. So you maximize your wave count because somebody sits with you, gives you that access to that resource, and then somebody else at least sees what you're doing. Because back in the days, it used to be you go out with one surf coach, he pushes you in or tells you to go left and right whilst he's catching his own waves and has a great time. And then you go back to the beach and you're being told, yeah, senior, you need to compress a little bit more and look where you want to go. And then next time it's going to be better. So you're not really held, you're not really coached.
Yeah. It's interesting because I can almost already see the comment on this, because on the one hand you have this free-spirited surf thing, and then on the other side you have more the almost like an industry. And I feel that the more free-spirited is probably the ones that grew up with it. And then you have those people like me, for example, that is landlocked somewhere in Berlin, that does it every now and then and wants to maximize the experience, and I'm paying for it, right? And I want to talk about that second circle, because I think those that grew up with it, obviously they would still benefit from having a surf coach, but especially if you want to get better. If you just do it as like for fun and you don't care so much about your progression, you can just keep surfing and try to get better by yourself. But for the people like me, and I think we make up quite a big bunch of surfers, it's like, yeah, you know the basics, you know what a duck dive is, you know what a wave looks like, if you should go left or right, at least in most of the cases. But when I met you, I felt quite plateaued, and I kept complaining it's not like riding a bike, like you almost always start from zero. And you said, no, that's not true. How can these beginner to intermediate surfers progress?
Well, they need to treat it like the discipline it is. And, when you say the discipline it is, putting in the work, that doesn't really have to be, serious as well. It can still be very open and free-spirited. But even when you look into the most free-spirited free surfers out there, if you look into their real routines, they're quite disciplined humans. All of them have probably a breathwork practice. All of them stretch. All of them do somewhat of strength and conditioning, and all of them take the act of surfing absolutely serious. So passion is really important. You need to be in, 100%, and 100% of your passion that goes to surfing. It doesn't mean you need to drop everything to progress, but it means when you train, everything you do should be around surfing. If you're pulled between 10 other sports, it's going to be very hard to make progress. And for anyone back home, in Germany, or anyone landlocked who wants to progress, take it as the discipline it is. Like, realize that when you go on that surf trip, it doesn't start 2 weeks before. It's the entire year. People often need these motivational carrots where they're like, oh my God, I'm going on a surf trip now, or I'm going to buy a surf skate. I'm going to start going swimming 2 weeks before. You're borderline too late. You should train before, and the 2 weeks before you go on the trip, start the recovery process a little bit if you've trained properly. And that can all be done still really lighthearted. When I say go 100%, it doesn't mean every single day you need to train. It means, when you have free time between work, family obligations, whatever you do, put it as, this is what I do. I'm a surfer. So when I go running, I go running for surfing. When I go to the gym, I train for surfing. When I do another sport, I see how that helps me get better at surfing. And if you take surfing as a year-long practice, the outcome of getting better is inevitable. I would argue even that a lot of landlocked surfers are maybe in a better disposition than some coastal surfers sometimes, just because, they need to focus more on their technique potentially when they can't surf, versus a coastal surfer that goes out every day and might even be repeating some patterns that don't serve them well. I mean, again, you can't generalize this because every person is so different in their learning approach. But if people want to make progress, they need to take it like as a discipline as it is. It doesn't start on the surf trip. The surf trip should be fun. You should go there and actually, be able to do things that you've already kind of practiced.
No. And before we get into how you individually work with your coachees, I want to talk about the name of your book, which is called Rail to Rail, or at least it's part of the book. And it's a fundamental concept that most intermediate surfers even don't really understand. What is rail to rail surfing and why is it so important?
Rail surfing, or rail to rail surfing, is actually how surfing should be done. You put a surfboard on rail, and that's where it accelerates. That's where it gives you hold. That's how you turn and maneuver the board around. We called it rail to rail because of that, and because having a foundation in rail surfing is a prerequisite to advance. So our next book is coming out in midsummer. It's going to be paddle and pop-up, because that's the first important thing that you need to be able to be good at to a certain level, to be able to catch waves and to pop up. If your pop-up is not good, you can't even get to rail. But because rail to rail, because we saw the lack in awareness of rail surfing, we started with this as the volume 1 rather than with paddle and pop-up. To answer the question, what is rail surfing? It is a very, very interesting sensation when you lean off your axis over your rail and when you surrender to the energy of the wave. There's nothing quite like it. Absolutely not. And I've done a lot of different sports in my life, and I've done a lot of other things in my life, and had many absolutely beautiful experiences outside of surfing, but there's nothing quite like putting your rail really in the water and surrendering to the energy of the ocean. There's nothing like it. There's elements of vulnerability, of strength, of falling meets flying, almost borderline on certain moments, without going up into the air. And this experience can start at a beginner surfer. This can start as you start going down the trim line. And, you know, potentially we can pull that up later and show what a trim line is. And then when you meet that first section on, the shoulder of the wave, which we refer to as the x-axis on the wave, which is further down from the power, from the pocket, you can put the rail, you can go on rail already in your first 2 years of surfing. If you put the right approach to your training and if you put the right approach to your surfing. Yeah, I hope this answered your question a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And this then brings us into the actual land-based training as well, because you can learn the basics of rail-to-rail surfing on land already, but maybe we need to step back a little bit. How do you, if somebody signs up to your program, which is actually not that easy to get into, so apply fast. If somebody's in your program, how do you work with them?
Well, you're right. Like at the moment, our program is full. That's why we are doing teacher trainings now, because we need to expand, and we have the demand as well in our community of people that are already on surfing anatomy that want to start transmitting this knowledge to others in their community, like all around. We're a global method, so we have our first coach trainees already. And how do you start with a surfer that starts our methods? First of all, we need to assess, where is the surfer at in their journey? Is he a beginner surfer, or is he already an advanced intermediate surfer? So we need to kind of see where their surf IQ is. So we would get into a Zoom call with them and kind of touch base with them and see what is their awareness of their conceptual understanding of surfing. Like, how do they think to turn a board? How are they turning a board? The beginner, how does he think to turn a board versus the intermediate surfer? What is his current skill level of turning a board? So there we assess his like surf IQ and his skill already. And then from there, it depends really where they're at. The beginner surfer that I mentor from the ground up, generally I start with, of course, the pop-up, that they need to learn this. But then we start with 2 different maneuvers outside of the bottom turn. One would be, we start practicing a roundhouse cutback, and the other one would be a pivotal point like a snap. Now, the roundhouse cutback, yeah.
And how do you do that on land? Because typically for these maneuvers, you would, as most think, need a canvas to train that on.
Well, it really depends on the surfer as well, again. Not one size fits all. Some people are very theoretical in their understanding. Other people are very sensory. They need to feel things. So I need to really assess, how does this person learn best? And then how do we segment? At the beginning of this podcast, I started talking a little bit about the conceptual understanding and our refined language. So we have a model that we call Pepper. Pepper segments every surfing maneuver into different phases. Pepper stands for preparation phase, entry, peak position, exit, and recovery. So we start at preparation phase into entry, and we would start establishing different drills depending on what is the surfer's like fitness, what is the board they're riding, what are the waves they're riding, and where are they already at maybe their cutback or their bottom turn, and how do we need to like mold them in a different way that they have a better outcome. And it varies a lot, really a lot. It can be from land-based training on the yoga mat to, going maybe rapid surfing to all the way to, sometimes at beginner surfers, I like to use surf skate. Other than that, when you get to the intermediate level, we like to tone away from surf skating just because of the high injury risk and, the debate around how much of this really crosses. Yeah, I mean, in our method, we speak about something that we refer to the off-axis fall, which when a surfer is on a wave, he actually puts his center of mass out of base of support. So that means that on a lot of maneuvers, especially when we talk front side into a cutback on the heel side, on your heel side rail, the hip will be very far out of base of support. And initially, if you do this on land, recreate this on land, you will fall. On a ramp, it's hard to recreate it because the ramp is, unlike the wave in the ocean, is stationary. So the body mechanics and the feeling you would need to recreate this on the ramp are quite different. There are some similarities, but I see a lot of things that are actually not crossing when I see people like surf skating, skateboarding, or snowboarding in a ramp. Some of them do cross 100%. And we need to get the body used to being in these certain positions. And then the surfer needs to trust. He needs to trust the wave, because the wave will provide supportive energy for you to not fall as you lean your center of mass out of base of support.
Mm. And these drills, how do they work together with your book? Like, if I don't get a space on your program, can I still get the book and learn something?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in the book, we go through the vastness of of a few different maneuvers and their different stages, preparation phase, entry, peak position, exit, and recovery. There's clear angles in there and certain muscles that need to be trained, or at least need to be felt as cues for you to be able to, put rotation in at the right moment, not too early, to be able to lean off axis. What are you looking for? What sensations are you looking for in your hip flexors maybe, or in your glutes? And then you can start recreating this, and or like go through the material and start training as well. In the book, there's a couple of exercises that help you reinforce those muscles. Yeah, but the drills in itself, it's very specific. It's super specific. I mean, there's a couple of people when they are at the same level, you can give them the same drills, but then it's like the first, drill that you give them can be quite the same. But then every person, I've never gotten the same drill back from any person. They always change it based on their body mechanics, based on their awareness, and based on their style. Naturally, that comes out. And then from there, you start building. You're like, okay, so this is how he's gonna, if I take you for an example, this is how Joe looks when he goes into his roundhouse cutback. Okay, he has a natural predisposition to, I'm just making this up now, to maybe have the hip shifted slightly more in this way, which gives him a little bit more front foot heaviness. Well, then we need to address that depending on the wave canvas he's going to be exposed to, where he wants to place this, but also maybe on the way he approaches his bottom turn. There's not just one size fits all. It's very specific in the end, and I think that's why our program has good results, because we do not treat it on the superficial level. We go very deep, and we teach you how to really apply it, and not just in one context. Once the knowledge is deep in your foundation and in your muscle memory, and you've been exposed to different canvases and different situations, it's going to be easier and easier to get into this flow state mode on the wave, which guides you to peak experience. That's following one of our slogans in Surfing Anatomy, where your guide to peak experience in the ocean. We're helping you connect the dots in your surfing so you are able to hit that peak experience in a flow state over and over again.
And I can guarantee you will never watch a surf movie the same way again. You're always looking, oh, when are they throwing their back arm? How are they moving on the board? When do they start with it? So you really internalize that pepper thing. It's,
I'm glad.
it's a good way to watch surf video. Now, coming from the land-based drills, what are the top 3 exercises besides cardiovascular training, and maybe even in cardiovascular training, that every surfer should build in their routine?
Again, that's brings it back to what I said earlier. It really depends what you're training for. A lot of the evidence that you find right now in surf culture is all based on pro surfing, not really on amateur surfing. And the pro surfing is a complete different surface than most of us would surf. As an example, me and my business partner, we used to sometimes play heats together, but we would go out surf together and do 30-minute heats or 20-minute heats in pro surfing, but we would film each other. So one person is on the beach, runs out, does a 20-minute heat, tries and surf as many good ways as possible, and the other one comes out. That is a very different training and a very different approach to versus how most people would surf. When you go out surfing, you do not have that pressure on performing as soon as you're out, so you would train completely different versus the the person that surfs in Lombok on a longboard where the waves are very soft and easy. What are some of the main things that you always need to train? Yes, you need a little bit of paddle fitness. You can do that with swimming. You don't have to do that. I reckon the most important thing is your power paddles. That's where you gas out the most. Power paddles can be trained with pull-ups and gorilla rows and various other exercises just to hit the full range of motion of the power paddle, because this is where you get really tired. Power paddle is performed when you turtle roll or when you duck dive and you have the current sucking you back or the energy from the wave, and you need to start that initial paddle again to gain momentum. Power paddles are performed as well when you sprint or when you paddle into a wave, and they're very gassing. They make you very tired. So this is something that I recommend for any surfer to do, no matter the level or no matter the waves they want to surf. And then thoracic extension when you lie on the surfboard. When you lie on the surfboard and you're in that, from people that come from other disciplines, they might know this like the Superman pose. When they lie on their tummy, they arch their back up and they put their arms in front, which trains the entire back muscles and gets you into this thoracic extension that you are on the surfboard. That is probably one of the things that fatigues most people. You see that when people come into surfing that have really strong fitness, people from CrossFit, for example, that can perform hundreds of pull-ups, but then they lie on the surfboard. Yeah, and then they lie on the surfboard, they can hardly lift up their head because they're lying flat on the surfboard because they're not used to holding that isometric hold on the surfboard for that long. So these are certain prerequisites that are really good to train, no matter what kind of surfing you're aiming for. If you're going for high performance shortboarding or longboarding, outside of the paddling, and then you need legs. You need legs.
Bad news
Most
for the gym bros.
more bad news for that. Never skip leg day. No, you need.
Is this also explosive training or pure strength, or what would you recommend that?
That really depends again on the surf style that you're doing. Most of us want to be recreational surfers. It's our passion. It's our fun. Mix it up. Do one strength day a week where you focus on squats, on maybe Romanian deadlifts are really good. Your posterior chain is really important to train in surfing. It's often overlooked. Underdeveloped glutes from sitting a lot on office chairs. I swear by kettlebells, or we swear by kettlebells, and I mean the evidence shows it as well. We've done our research. My business partner is a physiotherapist. We cross-referenced it with other disciplines, and we saw that, for example, kettlebell swings are really beneficial, especially if we're talking about explosive bottom turns. It really depends. Like I could go into so many tangents about, if you want to pop out fast out of your bottom turn, go for an air, let's do kettlebells, let's do box jumps, let's do this. It really depends on the surfing. For the general recreational surfer, mix it up. Do kettlebell swings, do some isometric holds, do strength. Make sure your cardio is there. Make sure you sustain a general fitness level. Then you're good. And then I think the biggest one is choose your sessions wisely. A lot of people they come to the ocean and they're overwhelmed. They're like, oh my God, I've trained so much, I couldn't even get out the back. The ocean changes a lot. Be aware of the tides. Like one of the biggest differences, what you can have two surfers on the same level, same skill, go and surf the same spot on the same day, but with a difference of 4 hours in the tidal change. One surfer has the best session of their lives and found it really easy to paddle out and it was so easy to navigate the lineup. The other surfer had the worst session of their life. And it's just based on tides, because the wave canvas changes based on how much water is above the sandbanks, for example, on a beach break, which then makes the wave structure either more vertical or a bit more fat and flat, and which makes the wave more. The energy of the wave is dispersed in a stronger way on you when the wave stands up more vertical, which makes it much harder to navigate, especially if you're not used to being in these conditions.
Yeah. And you personally built a global community by now. You have more than 100 members across different continents. What do you notice about people who actually stick with surfing and keep progressing versus those that drop off?
Yeah, it's passion for, if you're like a surfer or a student, the passion you bring towards the discipline, and for the coach as well, it's the passion. Like what gets you going. It's your passion towards it, the purpose that ignites the fire that lets you move forward on it. Like that's the difference. If your purpose is strong and you make this discipline your practice, then you can go very far on it. But you need to have a really strong passion for it. You have to be okay with delaying gratification. You have to be okay with, plateauing sometimes and pushing through these plateaus.
It almost goes back to what we discussed in the very beginning, right? It's like this passion, and you clearly have it. At the same time, you made this your job, and sometimes when you make your passion your job, you can lose the passion a little bit. What is it that personally keeps you pulling back to the ocean? Maybe the thing that science can't explain, maybe the more spiritual aspect of the ocean, if there is one.
I do think, or I do believe that the ocean has an immense healing power, immensely. And it works in very mysterious ways, but it's Mother Nature. And you see it when you live around coastal areas. As soon as the weather is good, everybody commutes to the beach, no matter the age. From the 1-month-old baby with the parents to the 88-year-old person sitting there still with the with the chair looking at the ocean and really soaking in even just the visual of the water. Water has a very calming effect that's already healing. And then for me as personal, I would say that, there's an edge between getting the wave of your life when you go out and the potential risk you're navigating as well, depending on what spot you serve and what kind of maneuver you're chasing. If it's a barrel or if it's an air or if it's a really hard turn in front of a couple of rocks because that wave gives you that canvas, versus the just going out there and there's like an energy when you come back from a surf. No matter how the session went, I think that's the more important one. No matter how the session went, there's an energy. You can just have the worst session of your life, just wipe out 10,000 times. And if you would bring that to skiing, if you would just go up with the ski lift and just roll your face through the snow 10 times, lose your ski and go back down, you would never say this was the best day of my life, I'll return tomorrow. You'd be like, this sucks, I'm flying back home. As in surfing, you come out after just being washed and beaten by the waves. And sometimes that's a hard session for every surfer. But no matter if you had the best surf of your life or the worst, you come out and you feel whole. You feel full. There's something that gives you this energy of I've got you. Something like that. There's something deep that's undescribable. It's almost like Mother Nature puts her arm around you. It's like, go on, son.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I can only second that. I think I've never had a single session in my life, and I've had a lot of frustrating sessions in my life, even catching no waves at all, where I would walk out and be in a worse mood than I entered the water with. There's this magical thing. And then maybe to close off the conversation, if there's one thing that you want every listener to take away from this conversation, doesn't matter if they surf for 20 years or if they are about to go on their first session, what is it?
Whatever you do in life, do it 100%. Don't hold back. Go 100% in. Do it. Don't listen to anyone externally that tells you don't do it. If you feel the pull, dig a deep well and keep digging and go in 100%. There's a lot of beauty. If it's art, if it's music, if it's martial arts, if it's surfing, no matter the discipline, follow that pull and go in 100% with love and passion.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Joe. Where can people find you online?
You can find us on surfinganatomy.com, of course. And that's it.
Perfect.
make sure if I can put it in the last word, if you're interested in developing your skills as a surf coach, we're running it's kind of our first official. We've done an unofficial one. We already have 2 coaches assigned. We're running our first official surfing anatomy postgraduate teacher training. So for anyone that is already a surf coach, ISA level 1 or 2, or yoga coach or fitness coach or any other discipline, and wants to either just deepen their knowledge or start sharing surfing in their community, we're running our first teacher training this year from Brittany, from our headquarters, where we have a almost 300 square meter training facility with gym, yoga space, podcast. We have a library in there with all our evidence-based research from other disciplines. We have a surf history corner there, Strapling Bay. So it's a full surfing anatomy headquarters, and we're running it from there in Brittany. So the dates will be released by the end of this month, and anyone who's interested, feel free to reach out and grab a spot.
Yeah, and I can only say working with Joe has been the most transformative aspect for my personal surfing. So I can only highly recommend moving this path. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today with us, Joe, and all the best.
Thank you, Joel. Have a nice day. See you.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube and our Instagram.
Where the ocean meets